So this is Baruch Fleischman, and we're going to introduce now, as we're getting so very close to Rosh Hashanah, the day of Den, that we're going to come over here and take and look at as best we can. And this is an area that I really haven't learned before, so I want you to beg your pardon as I learn along with you. The Inyan of the Kiyas of Shofar, Rosh Hashanah. And that's where we're at right now. It's the seventh Rosh. Before we were working on what was Rosh was that we were working on the third drush. Okay, now we skipped and we came over here. There's a lot to learn. Obviously, there's a lot to know. So we're going to read as we do. We're going to read the words of the ARI HaKodesh, the holy ARI, as dictated to Rabbi Chaim Vital. The Be'inyan Tekiyah Shal Rosh Hashanah. So when we talk about the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, B'techidach as Bar Sidra, the first thing I want to explain is their order. And maybe you just thought that the order was the order, but now he wants to explain the order. Hinehim shloshim tekiyos. There's 30 different tekiyos. And you could count them up like this. We'll call this tashrash, but it's really tekiya, shvarim, trua, tekiya. Like that, that's four. Then tashas, which is tekiya, shvarim, tekiya, tekiyim, trua, tekiya. Now how we get that? There's and three is 4 and 3 is 7, and 3 is 10. So we do this, shlosh pa'amim, we do it 3 times, that makes 30. Meyushav be'ez birchos shofar achar kriyas sefer Torah. So after the kriyas of sefer Torah, there's a period there where we're going to say do 30 blasts. But the shloshim tekiyus mu'umed, then there's another 30 that are said. Now, in some synagogues, not the ones that I go to, that during the Shemona Esrei of the Mosaf, that during the Mosaf prayer is actually when the shofar is blasted. So he said, "V'shloshim tekiyos ma'umed b'musaf b'lachash," during the period of time where we're praying quietly. B'malchios, zechronos, and shofars. So there's 3 different sections of that. They're called malchios, zechronos, and shofars. V'arbaim tekilos b'kadesh, then there's another 40 of them that we say on Kaddish, which must be 4 sets of the 10. Shalachah tefilas musaf the chazara. Ba'ofen zeh. Now, he says this is the way it goes. He said, b'techila yitaka, so the first is you blow like this, tekiah, shvarim, trua, tequila. Shlosh pa'amim, 3 times. Then you do tashas, which is tekiah, shvarim, tekiah. Shlosh pa'amim, 3 times. Bataras, shlosh pa'amim. So all of them are 3 times. Hare shloshim tekiah, so you get to the number 30 again. V'yachsud the tekola tashras, tashas, and taras, pa'am acheres, and you do it another time. Hare arba'im kolos. So here we have 40 numbers, or the count of 40. Now, exactly what is the meaning of that? Well, that's what we're going to come and try to understand. Now, let me see if I can get myself set up better here, because just the logistics of where I'm working, and see if I can get it all in. And I couldn't. So let's go up a little bit more. We'll try to get all that in. Now, as we do, we're going to read the Tibuk Kavanos. And we're just going to read it straight after we read the words of the Rab. So Teren Yifnech of the Bayer Kavanos that the key is the Rosh Hashanah said, well, we could turn and actually start talking about the Kavanah of every one of the blasts. He said, "You boy the Chidus Seder of the Tekiyos Binyanim." So let's first talk about the order of the Tekiyos and their count. He said, Rosh Hashanah tokim me'et Tekiyos. So in Rosh Hashanah there are 100 blasts. Ki shloshim pa'amim shlosha pa'amim tokim shlosha pa'amim Tekiyos tokim shloshim Tekiyos. So basically what it is there are 3 times that we say 30 tekiyos. The pam achas eser tekiyos hare. So one time we do 10, just 10, that makes 100. So let me see how we got to those numbers and exactly what he means. He says, shlosha pamim tokim b'shlosha shloshim tekiyos. So 3 times we blast, or what's the right word? We trumpet or blast, I guess blast, token shloshim tekiyos. That's 3 times 30 is 90. If you say the shloshim tekiyos, who? So the order of them is like this. Ba'ofen shetokim shlosh pa'amim seder tashrash. We do 3 times the tashrash, which is shlosh pa'amim seder tashrash, shlosh pa'amim seder tashas, shlosh pa'amim seder tras have shloshim. Now you add those up and you find out they come out to be 30. So that's a set. Shloshim metoch meya. So this is 30 of the 100. Hatikiyos, hey, but the kiyos, the miyushav, these are all done during the period of time which is called the miyushav. Acher tefillah chakras or kriyas haTorah. So after you daven chakras, and there's a kriyas haTorah, after that period of time, then we're going to have this what we call the tekiyos of miyushav, which come after this. Shetokim al shlosh pa'amim tashras, and then we do 3 times tashras, shlosh pa'amim tashras, shlosh pa'amim tras, hare shloshim, this makes 30. So he says, because Seder Hazecha Betokim od Shloshim Tekiyos HaMa'umed, then there's another session which they call the Ma'umed. But the tefillah is Lachash Shal Mosef, which takes place during the tefillah of Nachash, of the silent prayer during Mosef. Now, I think it's probably, I have been in congregations before where they did, during the Shemona Esrei, blow the shofar. That is a Mosef. And I think it's really, really particularly poignant in the middle of that prayer. However, Acher Kach Tokim Od Arbayim Tekiyos, but then after that, we do another 40 Tekiyos. Ki Shloshim Tekiyos Tokim B'Chazaras Hashat. So now the Mosef. So now when there's a Chazara of the Shas at the end of the davening at Mosef, B'Kadish, and then after that in the Kaddish, Tiskabel, after B'Kadish Tiskabel, Tokim Od Eser Spheros, there's another 10 we do then, ARI Arboim, that makes 40. So now that we've said, we've blown 3 times 30, so we did it 2 times, that's 60. 60 the kiyus, but the kiyus the biyusha, but lachash, but the tefillas mosaf. So now you got the 60. Tokim od shloshim pa'amim ba'ofen zeh. We do another 3 times. Shlosh pa'amim say the tashrash. Shlosh pa'amim say the tashas. Shlosh pa'amim say the tras. Harish shloshim tekiyos. There's another 30 comes out here. So now you have 90. Shloshim tekiyos elu choyziv v'dokeya od eser tekiyos tashras tashras tasav taras. Then you do singularly just one set. B'kadesh tiskabel, which is done at the point of the Kadesh Tiskabel. Shela'achar Zarsa Shatz, the Musaf, when the Shatz is done, Are Meyat Tekiyos. Now you see that's how you got to 100. Now what's Pshat? What's we're trying to tell us? Okay, that's just a count. All counts refer to Malchus. Let's see what he means. So he says, now we're reading the words of the ARI. The words of the ARI are V'yakavein, so this is your kavanah. Kihem meo kolas keneged shem yud ke vav ke demilui sag. Now, hopefully, he's going to show it to us and make it easier. He is. Osios miluyo acho, and also you take the name sag itself, which is yud vav dalet ke yud vav alavav ke yud. That gematria comes to 63, and then you count the letters of just the milui, just by themselves, which are gematria of 37, which incidentally is very interesting. That's the age which is stated by Yitzchak, who is Lashon Gevura, who is bound on the Akedah, and that's part of the dinim of Rosh Hashanah. So therefore the sag itself, which is the milui in its count, and then the lamed zayin, which is the milui, the whole milui, including the pasha. So he says that's 63. And just the milui itself is 37. That makes another 100. But the Indian Kabbalah of Shofar. So now, when we get here to the Kabbalah of Shofar, is Bayer Hated Inyan Sag Balaz Elo Ma Inyonim. Why are we learning about them? What's that in particularly important idea? So, in other words, you could always do that. You could take the name Sag, and you could take its milui, and you add them together, and then make 100. So, no. But there's a reason for this. So that's what we got to find out. So let's come over here to number ches. So number chesed of v'keven she'al yidecha tekiyos neknasin emocha de'ima. So now here's what actually happens. That when you start blowing the shofar, the tekiyos, neknasim emocha de'ima, that is the moment in which the mochin of ima go into Zer Anpin L'Orodor Matademaso to awaken him from his sleep. So understand the sound of the shofar represents the process by which the mochin are coming in to Zer Anpin. This is on the second time around already, or the third time, whichever way we count the dinim. Al kain mekuvana b'tekiyos the bechinas ima. So therefore, when you're doing this, you have to have the concept of the bechina of ima shehi gam shem sag gazeh, and he writes it out for us. So it's very so it's very easy to see that. He said v'kashecha nikach es shem sag. So let's take that name. So now it's a 63. V'norid b'menu daled osius yud kei vavke. Now remove from that the first letter of each, let's say of the yud, and then this is one yud, this is another yud, and then the vav and the yud vav and aleph and vav, and then the final yud. If you add those up, they're going to come to the number 37. So v'kasher nikach l'shem sag v'norid b'menu daled osius yud kei vavke atzma. She'olim Kaf Vav, which are 26. So take 26 away from 63. Yishara Rak Osius Amiloi, which is Vav Dalet, Yud, Aleph Vav, and Yud. She'olim the Gematria 37. Because Nitzarav Minyan Sag, so you take the Gematria of Sag, which is 63, with the minion, just as plain count of Lamed Zayin. Hare Zeh Begematria Kuf, comes to the Gematria of 100. Shuhu inyan meyat tekiyus, that this is the inyan of the 100 tekiyus, shatoking the Rosh Hashanah that are blown on Rosh Hashanah. Now let me see, I think I'm running out of visual space, so let me pull up a little bit, we'll get the rest of it. So there we are in the Rosh Hashanah, and here we are now. The Halon b'chamesh, let me see, we have one more, yeah. The Halon b'hemshech adrash is going to explain like this. The shofar itself, Merames the ima shehi shem havaya b'milu isag. The shofar itself is that. She is havaya b'milu isag. Now let's understand that. Ima, there are two aspects of ima, and I think this is correct. One is that ima, the panemius of ima, is a yud ke vav ke, and that is spelled in a milui that comes out to be 63. The chitzonius, or that's not the chitzonius, the wrong word. That's the panimi. That's the or panimi of ima. The or makif of ima is ekia. So ekia in the milui, and we see depends on where it is, would be, let's say, the gematria of 161. It's very close to the gematria of the word kesef. It comes to other places, but anyway, that's not the point here. So he said, but then he says the hevel that comes out of the shofar itself, behind the kol hashofar, so the voice of the shofar, who bebechinas amilui the shem sound. She'oida rabelaz kaminion hevel, like the gematria of the word hevel. So the sound that comes out, which is really a breath coming from us through this horn, which the horn represents ima, is now coming out, and that is going to be the hevel, which is the 37. Now, one way that I would look at this is I would look at this as almost like you have male and female here, is that you have the sag, which is the essence of it, being surrounded by its milui, because the milui is a second generation, so to speak. That's what I'm thinking. Ya'ala b'gematria mea, and this comes to the number 100. V'lechein tzarek l'tekoa b'Rosh Hashanah mea tekiyos, and that's the reason why you have to understand that we have 100 bracha, 100 blowings that we do on Rosh Hashanah. Now, let me get over here and read number. We went quite a ways actually. I went right through the Rav. So let's read the Rav a little bit and catch up. Let me see how much more I've got that we have to go to. So we try to do a little bit more. These are the words of the Rav. Of osios miluyueho levadam. So if you just take the letters that produce the miluy shehem gematria lamed zayin. So he said v'hinei sad v'lamed zayin hem kuf, that makes 100. The Inyan Kabbalas of Shofar, so now in regards to the Inyan, the Kabbalas of Shofar, Yizboyer Heitiv Inyan Sad V'Lav Elul Ma'en Yonim, and there's much more to be said about this. So he said, so Tekiya Shofar. So this is the last one we're going to do. These are the words of the Rav. He said the secret of the blowing of the shofar. Now remember that we're writing the actual words of the Rabbi of the Rav, that is of the ARI Kodesh. But sometimes there's a human being he's saying it to. That's Rabbi Chaim Vital. And sometimes Rabbi Chaim Vital is an extremely humble man. He said, "But echtov inyan echad." So he said, "Now I'm going to write down one thing that appears to my impoverished mind. That I did hear this from my master. But who's then? It's this. Kishnei shofros him. They're actually two shofars. Shofar hakatan b'yom Rosh Hashanah. There's a small shofar that is for Rosh Hashanah. V'hu b'sivuna. And it's in an aspect of Bina, the lower aspect of Bina, which is called Tavuna. The shofar hagodol, the asi levo, then there's another one. This is the shofar for the future. A shofar, he says, levo, be'ima ilah, it refers to ima ilah, kan nikras Bina, which is Bina. Bina is the next world, which we talk about Olam Haba and so on and so forth, and we have lots of different languages about Bina. And we start thinking about this, the Gan Eden, and so on and so forth. This is the concept of the Gan and Eden. He said, or Eden is within the Gan. He said, Be'ima iloh hanidras bina. Kamosha Amar HaKasa, like the Pasuk said, V'choya b'yom ha'hu yitaka b'shofar gadol. That day, they will blow from the great shofar. Mechlal the imakat. So it means that like this. That's the great shofar. It's mashma that ima, though here is the small shofar. This is the way that our rabbis also darshan this. And let's see what we could pick up here from number Yud Bet. Number Yud Bet in the tip of Kavanah says like this. Now we told you what the tekiyos are. We told you how they count out to 100. Yifna anta the so the tekiyos v'ganasim. Now we really want to get to the secret of that. Nearer the Marchul, so the Marchul wants to say Shoshama Ma'arizal Sheyesh No Shei Bechina Shoshofas. Now this seems like to me a point that's not directly into our ideas. That's what it seems like now. A shofar ha'echad kul ha'shofar shal Rosh Hashanah. The first one is the shofar Rosh Hashanah. A nikra shofar kam. So he named parts of Abba, ve'ima. So there's one parts of called Abba ve'ima. Nechlalim ke'echad, because they're joined together into oneness. So therefore, Abba is an aspect, you could almost say, but that's not what he wants to say. He says that aspect that is inside of Ima. It's in the Neshama, it's the Panemias, the Ruach that's inside of Ima. So this is that she is considered to be like a body. So therefore, the Abba is inside of her, and that's the concept of the same thing we have with our Neshamas, which is inside of us. Now, in the middle of their height or their stature, they're divided into two parts. And the first part is called Abba Ve'ima Elohim. Now, there's a lot to be said about this, and it's brought out in the Eitz Chaim and the Otros Chaim in some detail to be able to give us an idea of how it develops that Abba ve'ima Elohim develop themselves into Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna at a lower level. And what is that? That's the level that actually feeds their anpid, that actually goes into their anpid. They devolve downwards in such a way to do that. Now it's much more complicated, but anyway, there's a lot to be said about that. So here we're talking about Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna, the Fisha Abba Nechlal Be'ima, and since Abba is really a part of Ima, Abba ve'ima are one. So therefore, when I guess he means to say that Abba ve'ima are really called after the name Ima, because Abba is hidden inside of Ima. So when you go to the parts of or the chelik of Abba Ve'ima, which is the lower part, which is Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna, we call it Tavuna. It's the same way. The L'chalek chelik ha'elyon rak b'shem Ima Ilah, it's only called Ima Ilah. Ve'ein ma'azkirim as the Bechina Shal Abba. We don't mention Abba, we don't mention Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna, we just talk about the outside. It's like the wrapper. The wrapper of Abba Ve'ima is Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna and or Bina. So he's Israel Sabbath, Tavuna. So have a shofar shall Rosh Hashanah. So now the shofar that comes from Rosh Hashanah, Tavuna, it's the concept of Tavuna, which is lower element, which is the lower portion of Abba Ve'ima. Okay, Nikra shofar cotton. So therefore, it's called a small shofar. Now, I think I have to pull back just a little bit more. So he says, shofar sheni, but there's a second shofar. Which one is that one? A shofar shehiyah also the votes, a shofar that's going to be in the next world. Now this is the upper portion, which is called ima ilah. So what he's saying is that the highest dimension of light, which is processed through Abba Ve'ima Eloyin, has another generation which wraps them, which is called Yisrael Sabbath Tavuna, and therefore the light is more limited again down. It's mismadus of the light, by creating another dressing, so to speak, about the system that is processing the light, which also receives the light, but now it's in a hismatus or a sweetened, or I don't know if sweetened is the right word, but it's in a lesser condition. But Alkain Nikra Shofar Godel, so therefore this is called the Great Shofar. And we have one more, and that's our shir today. And it says like this: Ksiv v'hoya b'yom malchu yitaka b'shofar Godel, and it will be on that day that there will be a blowing for the great shofar. And we find here from the words of the rabbis, Shebekama Makomos, many different places, so he says, Shekama Makomos, Keshe Echtov Tebas Godel, when I'm going to write the word Godel, Darsha Beklal the Imakatn, it's the way they understand this is that we say that there's a shofar which is great. So we can darshan from this the Meklal the Ima the Ika cotton. So if you say there's one that's great, then it means that there's one that's small. V'chein v'pasuk zeh shekasav shofar gadol. So that pasuk that says it's got a great shofar. Lomdim mikach that we learn from this. Sheshanidu gam shofar cotton that we're also talking about a small shofar. Behind the shofar shall Rosh Hashanah. That's the motion of the shofar Rosh Hashanah. Also the bow, which is considered that. That was a little bit side note, I think. And so this is going to be Baruch Fleischman here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and we have finished the shir on shofar today. This is Baruch Fleischman.